Professor Brown, do you mind sharing some thoughts on I think it's the final appendix on Islam and the caste in South Asia? Because oftentimes when we think about anti-blackness, it's generally within sub-Saharan Africa or African American context. Whereas I'm glad that you actually spoke about the issue of anti-blackness or colorism within the South Asian context. So do you mind just talking a little bit about that appendix, please?
Yeah. By the way, I want you. So when I was writing this book, after I finished writing it, I was like, I wonder if because Habib actually wrote several books on this topic. He hasn't mentioned this, but I was like, I wonder if he would, I could email him. He would give me advice. So I sent him the Word document, and I was like, maybe like you could look at it or something. This book is a fairly long book, right? So he's like Goodwill Hunting Akande, as far as I can tell, because one day later, not even a day later, he sends me back the whole, and he annotated the whole thing, mashallah. I've never seen anybody who can read mashallah this fast, so I would take lessons from you or something. So he gave me comments on the whole thing. It was very valuable. He's too modest to talk about this. So, this is kind of pretty well-studied issue, and I just was drawing on existing scholarship of notion of colorism. So again, I talked about this before, right? The idea that, so first of all, you have these kind of a long traditions of what lighter skin, darker skin means in societies where there's like a potential for large variation in that. And you add to that, let's say, colonization by European society, like let's say Britain in India, and the idea, not only do you kind of, there's sort of a standard of beauty being imposed by the colonizer that you want to imitate, and then the colonizer is also favoring people that kind of look like them, right? So there's that dynamic added to it. You have a strong element of colorism in South Asia. Although there's a lot of debate in South Asia about whether or not this kind of colorism goes back to the pre-modern period or if it's a product of colonialism, but we won't get into the debates. But the reason, so that's one issue. The reason I was interested in caste, however, was because I was trying to think of something where, because there's not a lot of, in the fiqh tradition, you do have discussions about blackness and what that means in terms of marriage and things like that, but it's not like incredibly well discussed and fleshed out. Whereas one thing where you do have this really discussed at length is in the question of caste and marriage amongst Muslims in India, basically, South Asia. So I was really interested in how, looking at the way Muslim scholars talked about caste. And sort of, it's just like the example of blackness we talked about, right? There's some Muslim scholars who are like, look, Muslims are equal, right? And caste is this is not from the Islamic tradition, okay? So, this is not Islamic. We know what our values are. So it's clear that we shouldn't indulge this at all. On the other hand, Muslim scholars say, probably the majority of South Asian Muslim scholars say, okay, but one, part of the rules around Islamic laws of marriage is that we're supposed to respect custom, right? We're supposed to respect custom. As long as it doesn't violate the Quran or the Sunnah of the Prophet, we can respect it. And if part of that is, that there are these different castes and different communities and they really don't want to mix a lot, and if they mix, it causes a lot of social problems, we kind of have to respect that. So you have this, I was really interested in seeing how Muslim scholars weighed these priorities and using it as a kind of analogy to think about how we should do the same thing with race. That's why I discussed that.
I'm just conscious, I think we've got 5 minutes. Can I ask another question or should I open up for everyone? People look at me like they want to ask a question, so maybe my questions aren't entertaining enough. So shall we open up?